Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk with you guys a little bit about something that I think is kind of common sense and an observation, but a lot of people don't seem to realize, and that is that overuse injuries are actually far more likely and more common than actual overtraining is. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright guys, because what we see a lot, if you look at different YouTubers and other people who have all these little minor nagging injuries and they have to wrap everything up, who do a lot of this high volume training, and you can probably think of 6 or 7 or 8 different fitness YouTubers off the top of your head who kind of do the bodybuilding thing that fall into this category versus people who've actually shown real signs of overtraining. Perfect example, earlier this year I was starting to show mild signs of overtraining, but if you look at that realistically, look what it took for that to happen. Look what it took for that to happen. I was in a caloric deficit, losing small amounts of body weight, so I wasn't bulking. You guys got to remember, food intake matters. I was squatting to a max 6 days a week, deadlifting every day, bench pressing every day, and for several months straight, I made continual linear progress, meaning I was slowly adding weight to the bar on the squats. All right, squatting to a max, and then I got up to where I was doing 485 6 days a week. Alright, that's what we observed. While slowly losing weight. And again, at the point where I was deadlifting every day, doing other heavy lifts every single day, I had started adding in more back off volume, everything else. And then I started to experience mild signs of overtraining. Not like what you would think of as full-blown serious overtraining, but mild overtraining. It took months. Now keep in mind, I'm a guy in my 40s. In the normal testosterone range, and people need to remember that, I'm not abusing gear, guys. Abuse, I mean, any definition of abuse, people say, well, anyone who's doing it even for above the therapeutic reasons or doing it recreationally is abuse. Okay, but I'm not. I'm under the care of a medical doctor and in the normal range. Therapeutic dose prescription. Nothing is ever considered abuse of a substance when it's prescribed by a doctor in the normal therapeutic dosage. So, got that going on in my 40s and in a small caloric deficit. And that's what it took to reach even the mildest overtraining state. So anyone out there who's screaming about overtraining, oh, I'm scared of overtraining, are you guys serious? You really think it's that do you really think if you do 5 sets of heavy squats a week on Monday and you deadlift up to maybe 1 heavy set once a week somewhere in the week and do a bunch of bench pressing and curls and stuff, you guys really think you're going to overtrain? I doubt it. You got to be realistic here. And if you do, if any of you guys are overtraining, it's probably because you're eating 2,000 calories trying to get shredded. All right, that's probably what's happening with all those lifts. Most people are not in danger of overtraining. They really aren't. The vast majority are not. It should not be a realistic concern. But what you do see are all these overuse injuries, inflammation and everything else. And 9 times out of 10, where do people start seeing these overuse injuries? Where do they start seeing all this inflammation? Usually in muscles in which they do large volumes of isolation movement. In other words, the people who start complaining about their elbows hurting, if you ever notice it, most of them do like 15 sets of tricep press downs a week. You don't see many guys who do tons and tons of heavy benching and dips and other things. You don't see them complaining as much about their elbows and getting tendonitis in their elbows and everything, do you? Guys who do 20 sets of different types of curls every week, those are the ones who sometimes complain about their forearms hurting, like down here, that's where the bicep tendon goes. Now, it can happen to other people. I mean, I had issues with that doing weighted chin-ups to a max and with my low bar squatting every day. But that's also due to a previous injury. I didn't get it in my healthy side. I only got it in the side that's been damaged and surgically reattached. So a little bit of a different issue. So there was some possible overuse there in a previous injury. But for a healthy person, that might not have even happened. I don't know. We did, possibly. But the point is, look at what you see with all these guys. How many guys out here, fitness YouTubers, they got to wrap their legs up? How many of them do a bunch of leg extensions? or they don't really squat correctly, or they've been using knee wraps before, so they wonder why their knees hurt. Well, the previous knee wrap use. All these guys you see needing to wrap everything up. Knee wraps, elbow wraps, knee sleeves, elbow sleeves, claiming that this stuff hurts, but then you look at the way most of them train, they're throwing tons and tons of movements that aren't really particularly the way your body's designed to work. In other words, they're not normal movement patterns. They're movement patterns that people had to artificially create using machines or really strict focusing different isolation movements. I would suggest to you that this contributes more to overuse injuries than most compounds do. Now, compound movements even performed incorrectly or when muscle imbalances happen, they can contribute quite a bit too, or people who are just built a certain way. But usually it's beating these little repetitive movements over and over and over for large volumes using movement patterns that aren't particularly natural for your body. They aren't something you would just do moving around or jumping or running or picking heavy stuff up off the ground. Things that people have done for thousands and thousands of years is just part of our normal day-to-day activity out in the wild, before we were civilized. Those sort of movements don't usually contribute to overuse injuries very easily, but a lot of this other stuff does. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that it's easier for people to put in a lot of effort on these, or perceived effort, than bigger movements, because they're just not that exhausting, they're not that taxing overall, so people can tend to push them harder. And they can push them in more overall volume without really feeling that whole fatigue through their body, so therefore they can tell themselves I'm training harder because they're doing this when they're really not. But what does happen, you do see a lot more overuse injuries. You see all this inflammation, connective tissue inflammation, and ultimately, guys, you need to remember, if you're getting a lot of connective tissue inflammation, your knees are hurting, your elbows are hurting, your shoulder joints are hurting from a lot of these other movements you're doing. If you keep doing them and keep pushing through that inflammation you're starting to get, your chances of an actual injury, a real injury where something bursts or ruptures or rips, starts to go up very, very quickly. Right? That's usually your body telling you something. The reason you're getting all that inflammation is because your body is saying, hey, stupid, this is hurting me, this is injuring me, you need to stop before we cause something that's going to be permanent unless it's reattached surgically. That's kind of your warning sign, is your body telling you we're on the way towards this happening, you need to chill a bit. That's 10 times, 20 times more common in guys who lift than actual overtraining is. Right? Overtraining is real, but overuse injuries are quite frankly a much larger concern for the majority of people out there. They really are. And not to say that some people aren't going to push towards overtraining, but it's less common than some people would have you believe it really is. But getting tendinitis, getting inflammation that can lead to long-term pain that stays for years and years, that's way more common. And that's done by doing the other stuff. It's not actually by training hard. It's because of training on non-hard movements that are easier to do, but doing tons and tons of them. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.